Okay, here we go with stage 39. First thing off is the subjunctive use. We had one we focused on this chapter was indirect command, but we'll go over each one. We'll start off with the adjussive. The adjussive is a command, a polite command. Quintus domum veniat. Veniat is a subjunctive. Let Quintus come home or may Quintus come home would be a adjussive use. Purpose clause, we're going to use ut. We're going to use the subjunctive. We have senatoris, should be es. Conveni ut adiant. The senators meet to listen. The purpose of them meeting is to listen. That's the purpose clause. Result, need a so word. Tom. There's our so word. Tom salus est ut puellas puniat. He is so wicked that he punishes girls. That's got to be Garrett. Fear clause. We're going to remember if it's a nay, that's a positive fear. We do fear it. And if it's a ut, then we do not fear it. In this case, we have temebat nay centurio eum inveneret. He was afraid the centurion would find him. Next, we have our two indirects. First, our indirect question. We need some kind of questioning word or something that introduces a question. I want to know, cognoscere volo. That's introducing what you want to know, which is cur adsis. I want to know why you are here. Some of you guys are going, well, what is adsis? Well, that is ad sum. Sis is the subjunctive form of sum, so I get ad sis. Indirect command, I'm going to have an ut, also a commanding type word. In this case, I have orabat, agricolam, orabat, ut eum seraret. He begged Agricola to save him. This is our indirect command. Here is our infinitive identification. You're going to have to determine whether it's present active or present passive, perfect passive, future active, future passive. Our present is amare. Change that E to an I get amari. That's the passive form. Perfect, that's our ISSE to the third principal part, amawisi. And then amatum essa, that's our fourth principal part, plus essa. Amaturum essa, that's our future active. And amandum essa is our future passive. There are several of these on the test where you're going to have to identify whether it's what tense it is and whether it's active or passive. Next, you're going to have to be able to identify imperatives. Remember, I'm going to take a mare. I'm going to wipe off that re. That gives me my first imperative, just straight up love. If I add the te, I get the plural, you all love. You're going to have a couple of these that are the third declension, so they're a little tougher. So if I get the word duker, I take off the ere. That gives me my first command, duke, just lead. But if I add te, it doesn't look right. So I come over here to the little bitty I, and I add the I, and I get dukite, which is you all lead. That's the plural imperative. Finally, here I have the gerundive use. We have three uses of the gerundive. We have obligation, purpose, and adjectives. Our first one, mihi is enveniendus est, I must find him. This is our passive periphrastic or gerundive of obligation. Envendius, if we get the est, the form of sum. If I have a form of sum, I have obligation. Purpose clause. With the gerundive, I can use it for purpose. I can say Quintus amandai puellae gratia fugit. Quintus fled to love the girl. Couple of ways I can do this. I can use the genitive amandai puellae and gratia to create the purpose, or I can change that gratia to casa. Same thing happens. Genitive plus casa. Quintus fled to love the girl. I can also change it to accusative if I use odd. Odd plus the accusative. Same translation. Quintus fled to love the girl. If I use the casa, the gratia, or the odd plus the accusative, I'm going to get the same translation. Finally, I have an adjective. No odd, no gratia, no casa, no est. I just have an adjective. Here I have princeps servos inter faciendas. Castigat, the emperor chastises the slaves who are about to be killed. About to be killed is our adjective translation of the gerundive. Okay, so going back, we did subjunctive use, we did infinitive identification, ablative, absolute. I'm not going to go over, nor am I going to go over the ablative of means, adverbs and adjective, positive, comparative, superlative. That's on there. I'm not going to go over it. Verb tense identification, I'm going to let you practice that here in a second. Imperative commands, I talked about. Gerundive use is a fairly large part of the test, so I gave you plenty of that. Noun and adjective identification, this is harder than you think it is. I'm going to let you practice that once at least. You can do it. Choosing between active and passive verbs, we'll let you do that in a second. First, let's look at these five right here, and I want you to decide whether it's an indirect command, indirect question, purpose clause, fear clause, or result clause. Each one of those, 1 through 5, hit pause, read through them, and pick what you think they are. You might ID the subjunctive as well. Put a tricky one on here for you. Number one, he knows that the teacher will ask him to recite first. The command is going to be you recite first, so that's going to be an indirect command. Recitat is the subjunctive. Next we have Tom. Tom is a so word, going to be result clause. Number three, I have ne and orabamus, so he begs him not to do something. That's an indirect command. Number four, I have a ne again. I look at temebot. That's a fear. Because it is a fear verb, I know this is a D, a fear clause. And the last one I have quid, which is my question word. Wolo cognoscere. We talked about that earlier. I want to know why something happened. That question is in there, so it's indirect question. Next, we have translating infinitives and subjunctives. You're going to be asked to do both. The thing that you need to remember is which ones are same time, which ones are before. So in number one, I have docere, which is a present passive infinitive, so it needs to be the same time as the main verb audio. So it needs to be translated as passive present tense. Which one of those is it? You pick. Number two, I have audiunt. That is a present subjunctive. It needs to be translated as the same time as the main verb conveniente, which is present tense. So it needs to be present and active. You guys pick those and see what you got. You should have chose B for number one, artat. That is passive, and that is present tense. You have two here for audiant. That is present, and that is active. Using the gerundive, we went over three ways you can use this: purpose, obligation, and as an adjective. Looking at these five, you pick out which one you think it is. Okay, number one, we have est. Remember, when we get the gerundive plus est, we have be, obligation. The next one, we have odd plus the accusative. That's purpose. The next one, I don't have odd, I don't have gratia, I don't have casa. I just have the gerundive. That's an adjective. The next one, if you're smarter than I am, you realize that I messed up on making them a genitive. I have casa. So if I have casa, I have a purpose clause. The last one, I have gratia. Have gratia, have a purpose clause. Translating infinitives with their verbs. Here I give you three types of infinitives. It's the same sentence. The only thing I've changed is the infinitive. How do these change? That's your job right now. Look at A, B, and C and see which ones match with which. This goes back to our same time before and after. So if I have the present, it's going to be same time. That's why I get is asking as the present. This rogawisi has happened before, so I need a has asked. That's why it gets be. Rogatorum essa is future, so it happens after, and that's why I will get will ask. There are some choose the right verbs on this. I want you to pick one and two, go through those. Mostly it's asking you whether it's active or passive, but some of them are a little bit different. So try those two, see what you get. Both of these should have been passive. That's what it's expecting. The first one, abeo, should be the key that we should choose offenses esset for the passive. The second one, a little different because it has those ablatives there by the words. So you just have to kind of work through it and understand that unless you hear the speech or unless you listen to the speech diligently, you will be deceived. I need to make it passive. And remember that we have those passive endings, which are aris, ter, mer, mini, and entor. This one right here, we get the mini, which is mini. Finally, you're going to get a sentence like this where they're expecting you to understand which adjectives go with which nouns. They're going to separate the two. So as you look through here, there are two adjective noun pairs. Can you pick them out? Well, 2 and 3 go together, opera and medio. They are both ablative, singular, and neuter. That shouldn't trick you because that construction right there is pretty common for us to have the adjective and the noun separated by a preposition. We call that interlocking order. The other two, a little different. They're separated by contibat. Lightus is nominative singular masculine, so is erator. If I translate the sentence, it should make it a little bit easier. But if I can't translate the sentence, if I just look at those endings, I can probably get to where I need to be. So make sure you're asking yourself, what is the case, the number, and the gender, and do they match? Lightus and arator match case, number, and gender, so do opera and medio. For those of you that like to lock up those for sure points, here's our culture. How much money did writers make? Well, the money went to the booksellers, not to the writers. The writers would go sell and get maybe a small amount from the booksellers, but the profits that came from selling the books actually went to the booksellers themselves. How could they protect their work from plagiaries? They couldn't. There were no copyright laws. I mean, we saw that with Marshall whenever he was talking to the guy that was trying to claim that he had written those epigrams. We saw Marshall react the way that he did. Who did they write for? Their audience were their friends and their family. Who was Quintilian in history? He was a rhetoric teacher. How did they present their writing? They presented it aloud and among friends. Actually, reading silently is a fairly new phenomenon. It came along in the Middle Ages with the monks. They always read aloud. That's why when you go to the library, you have those columns in between you and the next guy. It really was, it's fairly new. Reading silently is fairly new. English vocabulary. Fallacy is a false idea. Discrimination is prejudice. Semester is a 6-month period. And arboretum is like a wooded area, wooded park. Intersperse is to kind of spread out among other things. Dissimulate is to hide by pretense in order, to lie. Perdition is destruction, completely unable to come back from. Decadence is deterioration or decay. Capillary is a tiny little blood vessel. Campus, that is the grounds of a college, the grounds of a school. Sporadic is occasional. Transliterate, to write characters, like, how do I say this? Writing characters from another alphabet. So whenever we write Greek in English, that would be transliterate. Soprano is the highest female voice. Here's some cultural terms. You have the Argaletum is a street that was reserved for booksellers. Maecenas was a famous Roman patron. He loved writers. Ars Mortuorum is a poem about the art of love or the art of friendship written by Ovid. The Education of an Orator is a teacher instruction manual written by Quintilian. Plautus was a playwright and a comic. Cicero was a famous orator and a lawyer. Ovid was a poet. Martial was a poet. Pliny the Younger was a historian, famous for his rhetoric. And finally, Virgil was a poet. Virgil wrote the Aeneid. Martial was all about his epigrams. Ovid wrote the Metamorphoses. And Cicero, he was associated with one of the more famous Civil War, I guess, kind of a revolt. He kind of headed it off before it happened, and it's called, he wrote some speeches against, Catiline was the guy's name. Next, we need to know the difference between ancient and modern literature, how they were meant to be read. Ancient literature, read aloud. Modern literature, read silently. Money made, we can make tons of money today by writing books. They didn't make much money or any money writing their books. Protection of original work. We have all kinds of property law or copyright laws today that ensure that other people can't take what we wrote and say that it's theirs. They had no copyright laws in ancient Rome. Public speaking. For us, we do have occasional readings by the authors, but not a big part of selling books. That was a huge part of selling books, was public reading, public speaking, to sell their books in the ancient world. The effect of the writing. The ancient writing was much more dramatic in its form. They really focused on the formation of words, the sound of words, and things of that nature. Today, the effect of the structure of words, not so much as it is the plot, etc. So much more dramatic for the speaking purposes for the ancient writings. Influence of the writers, education. Well, today we have writers that come from all over the place, including ones that aren't educated. Today, writing is more associated with our life experience. The influence of writers in ancient world would have been very much influenced by the teachings that they went through from their rhetor, from their rhetoric education. Who was Quintilian? Well, we obviously know that he was a famous educator. He was also a famous orator. He was paid by the state. Actually, Vespasian gave him a salary. He was paid by Vespasian to teach rhetoric, not literature. He was more of an orator than anything else. He taught people like Pliny the Younger. He wrote a he actually favored poetry, and he did have his students write about poetry, especially Ovid, whom he thought was particularly excellent. Most of the stuff they ask you about Quintilian comes from the stories that we read, so as long as you remember him, you should be good. Latin vocabulary. If you want to look these words up from the Latin vocabulary, they're scattered throughout your test. There's not an actual Latin vocabulary section like there normally is, but these are some of the words I felt like that you might want to look up to help you with your translating. Well, short and sweet. That's it. Good luck. See you after the test.